I retired after 31 years building roads for the state of Tennessee. I know what a legal right-of-way looks like. I know what one doesn't look like. I bought 99 acres last December. First morning on the property, I counted 4 vehicles using a gravel track through my land before 8 a.m. Pinecrest Estates HOA stickers in every rear window. No easement in the deed records. No county road classification. Just 312 households using a shortcut across private property like it belonged to them. I installed the gate on day 6. Their attorney sent a demand letter. 14 years of community use, prescriptive easement, remove the gate or face litigation. I asked my attorney to pull the county road department's correspondence file. Page 7, August 2009. A letter from the previous owner to the county. The road is private property. I did not authorize this use. Filed permanently in the public record. Available to anyone who asked. Nobody had asked. Let's begin at square one. Where are you joining from today? Let me know. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Ray Calloway had spent 30 years building roads he would never own. That was the nature of the work. Highway design, infrastructure engineering, the particular discipline of a career spent calculating load tolerances and drainage coefficients, and right-of-way boundaries for roads that would carry other people's traffic across land that belonged to someone else. He had been good at it. He had been methodical and patient and precise in the way that civil engineering selects for. The work demanding a temperament that could hold a survey map and a deed description in simultaneous focus, and find the place where the legal boundary and the physical ground either agreed or did not. He had retired in April of 2023, 31 years with the Tennessee Department of Transportation, the last 11 as a senior project engineer, overseeing highway corridor acquisitions in the eastern part of the state. He had shaken hands at the retirement lunch, and had driven home to the house in Knoxville that he and Patricia had bought in 1998, and that had been too large and too quiet since Patricia died in 2019. He had sat on the back porch that April evening and had looked at the yard and had thought, I am going to buy land. He had known what kind of land before he started looking. He had spent 3 decades acquiring right-of-way corridors across rural Tennessee properties, farmland, timber tracts, creek bottoms, ridge parcels, and he had developed, through the accumulation of those acquisitions, a specific appreciation for working land. Not recreational land, not a lake house or a weekend retreat. Working land, the kind that produced timber or cattle or both, the kind that required attention and returned value, the kind that gave a retired civil engineer something to manage with the same methodical care he had applied to highway corridors. He had been looking for 8 months when the Crestwood County listing appeared. Parcel 11-0044-002 had been listed by the estate of Curtis Hale, 99 acres in the western portion of Crestwood County, Tennessee, the parcel sitting on a gentle west-facing slope with mixed hardwood and pine timber on the upper 2/3 and a creek-bottom pasture on the lower third that had carried cattle at some point in its history and could again. The listing price was $287,000. $2,900 per acre, reasonable for Crestwood County timber ground in late 2023. The listing agent had noted, absentee ownership for 15+ years, property in need of attention, significant timber value, creek access, County Road 7 frontage on western boundary. Ray had driven to Crestwood County on a Thursday in November, a 4-hour drive from Knoxville, the last 40 minutes on county roads that he had assessed out of professional habit, noting the pavement condition and the drainage structures and the right-of-way widths. He had met the listing agent at the CR7 entrance to the property, a gravel pull-off on the western boundary where a rusted farm gate hung open on a broken hinge, the gate's latch mechanism corroded past function, the no trespassing sign that had once been wired to the gate lying in the tall grass 20 feet from the pull-off. He had spent 4 hours walking the property. The timber was what the listing had suggested, mixed hardwood on the upper slope, white oak and hickory, and some marketable cherry in the draws, a stand of mature loblolly pine on the northeastern ridge that a timber buyer would find interesting. The creek bottom was overgrown. 15 years of no cattle management had allowed the pasture to advance toward brush, but the soil was good, and the creek ran clear, and the fence lines, though down in places, followed a survey that Ray had checked against the deed description before he made the drive. The property was what it was described to be. He had also found the track. It ran east to west across the property's midsection, a gravel and dirt road, 0.6 miles in length, beginning at the property's eastern boundary where it met the fence line of the Pinecrest Estates HOA subdivision, and ending at Ray's western boundary, where it intersected County Road 7, approximately 300 feet north of the main CR7 gate. The track was in better condition than anything else on the property. The gravel surface maintained, the drainage ditches alongside it recently cleared, the vegetation on the track's edges cut back to a width comfortable for a passenger vehicle. Someone had been maintaining it. Someone had been using it regularly enough that the maintenance was ongoing. Ray had stood at the track's eastern end, the point where it met the HOA subdivision's western fence line, and had looked west along its 0.6-mile length. He had looked at the gravel condition, the drainage, the maintained edges. He had then looked at the HOA fence line, where a gate had been installed at the track's eastern terminus. A newer gate, powder-coated steel, a combination lock on the latch, the gate set into the HOA's fence line as a permanent installation rather than a temporary opening. He had taken 3 photographs and had driven back to Knoxville. That evening, he had pulled the Crestwood County deed records online and had searched parcel 11-0044-002 from its current ownership back through the chain of title. Curtis Eugene Hale had acquired the property in 2007 from a farming family named Presley. The Presley family had owned it since 1962. There was no recorded easement on the parcel in either direction. No right-of-way, no access easement, no utility easement crossing the midsection. The track did not appear in any recorded instrument as a legal right-of-way. He had also pulled the Crestwood County Road Classification Index. The county maintained a classified road list. Every public road, every county-maintained road, every road with a public right-of-way designation in the county. The list updated annually and filed with the county clerk. He had searched the index for any road classification associated with parcel 11-0044-002. The track was not on the list. He had called the listing agent the next morning and had made an offer at asking price, contingent on a clean title search. The title search had confirmed what the deed records showed. No recorded easement, no right-of-way, clean title. He had closed on December 14, 2023. He had moved onto the property the first week of January, not into the farmhouse immediately, the farmhouse requiring work before it was livable, but into a travel trailer he had parked near the CR7 gate while he assessed the property's needs and began the timber evaluation. He had contracted a local timber buyer named Harlan Webb for an initial cruise in late January, and he had begun walking fence lines in preparation for restocking the creek bottom pasture with cattle in the spring. His first morning on the property had been a Tuesday. He had been awake at 5:30, the January dark still complete, and had walked the property's western boundary from the CR7 gate south to the creek, crossing before the light came up full. He had noted the fence condition. 3 sections down on the southern boundary, the posts rotted at the ground, the wire lying in the grass. He had made notes. He had not walked the track on his first morning. He had walked it on his second. He had been at the track's western end, the CR7 intersection, at 7:15 on Wednesday morning, the January light thin and flat, the thermometer in the travel trailer having read 28 degrees at 5:30. He had been looking at the drainage ditch alongside the track's western section when he heard the vehicle. It had come from the east, from the HOA subdivision's direction, moving west along the track at a moderate speed, the tires on the gravel producing the specific sound of regular use on a familiar surface. The vehicle had been a dark blue Honda CR-V, a woman driving, a travel mug visible in the cup holder. The CR-V had reached the track's western end, turned north onto CR7 without stopping, and had been gone in 40 seconds. Ray had watched it go. He had noted the time in his field notebook, 7:43 a.m. He had also noted, because he had been standing close enough to read it as the vehicle passed, the small rectangular sticker on the CR-V's rear window. White background, green border, the Pinecrest Estates HOA logo, a membership parking identification sticker of the type HOA communities issued annually to residents. He had stood at the CR7 intersection for another 40 minutes. 3 more vehicles had used the track in that time. A pickup at 7:51, a sedan at 8:04, another SUV at 8:22, each one coming from the HOA's direction, each one carrying a Pinecrest Estates parking sticker, each one turning onto CR7 and heading toward the county seat, without stopping or acknowledging that they were crossing private property. He had counted the tire tracks at the track's western end, the compressed gravel showing the accumulated passage of regular vehicle traffic, the track's surface worn to the consistency of a maintained access road. This was not occasional trespass. This was a commute route. He had walked back to the travel trailer and had opened his field notebook to a clean page and had written, "Track, eastern boundary to CR7 intersection, 0.6 miles. No recorded easement. No county road classification. Active use by HOA residents. 4 vehicles observed 7:43 to 8:22 a.m. Wednesday. HOA gate installed in subdivision fence at eastern terminus. Track surface maintained. Drainage ditches cleared. Use appears ongoing and regular." He had underlined, "No recorded easement." He had spent days 3 through 5 walking the property's remaining boundaries, completing the fence line assessment, and meeting with Harlan Webb for the timber crews. Harlan had walked the upper slope with him on Friday afternoon and had said, without being asked, that the loblolly pine stand on the northeastern ridge was worth between $40,000 and $55,000 at current pulpwood and saw timber prices, and that the hardwood on the upper slope would produce another $25,000 to $35,000 in a selective cut that left the property's long-term timber value intact. Ray had listened and had made notes and had thought about the track while Harlan talked, the prescriptive easement question forming in his mind with the same methodical clarity he applied to right-of-way problems in his engineering career. He had spent 31 years acquiring easements for the state. He knew what a valid easement looked like. He knew what the statutory requirements were. He also knew what 14 years of informal use looked like when someone tried to convert it into a legal right. He had installed the gate on day 6, a Saturday, the gate sourced from the Tractor Supply in the county seat, a standard 16-foot galvanized farm gate, the posts set in concrete on either side of the track at the CR7 intersection, where the track left his property and met the county road. He had hung the gate, adjusted the swing, installed a heavy-duty padlock on the latch, and had posted 3 no trespassing signs, one on the gate itself, one on each post. He had done the same at the track's eastern end, where the track met the HOA's subdivision fence line, a matching gate, matching lock, matching signs. He had also posted no trespassing signs at 200-foot intervals along the track's entire 0.6-mile length, signs on fence posts and tree trunks, each one visible from the track surface, each one consistent with Tennessee's statutory requirements for posted land. He had done the posting correctly because he had done right-of-way work for 31 years, and he knew that the legal defensibility of a property closure depended on the adequacy of the notice. The signs were the right size, the language was legally sufficient, the spacing met the statutory standard. He had not done it to be aggressive, he had done it because it was correct. He had driven back to the travel trailer at 4 p.m. Saturday, and had sat in the folding chair outside the trailer door, and had looked east along the track from the CR7 gate. The gate was hung straight. The lock was seated. The signs were visible at the standard distance. The track was closed. Donna Marsh had arrived at the CR7 gate at 7:51 on Sunday morning. Ray had heard the vehicle before he saw it, the sound of a car stopping on CR7 at the gate's location, the engine idling, then silence. He had been at the travel trailer making coffee, the January morning at 24 degrees, his work jacket on over 2 layers. He had looked out the trailer window and had seen the dark blue Honda CR-V, the same vehicle he had logged at 7:43 a.m. on Wednesday, parked on the CR7 shoulder, the driver's door open, a woman in a tan coat standing at the gate. She had tried the lock. She had tried it twice, the padlock not moving, the gate not opening. She had looked at the no trespassing sign on the gate, and had looked at the sign on the left post, and had stood there for a moment with the particular stillness of a person who has arrived at a conclusion they do not accept. She had then turned and looked at the travel trailer. Ray had put on his boots and had walked out. She had been standing at the gate when he reached her, a woman in her mid-50s, the tan coat, a travel mug in her left hand, the right hand resting on the gate's top rail. She had a directness about her that was not unfriendly yet, the directness of a person who believed the situation was a misunderstanding that a conversation would resolve. She had said, "Good morning. I'm Donna Marsh. I live in Pinecrest Estates. I think there may be a problem with this gate." Ray had said, "No problem with the gate. It's working correctly." She had said, I use this road in the mornings. Most of us in the subdivision do. We come through here to get to the county road. It cuts a significant amount of time off the drive." Ray had said, "I understand. The road crosses my property. There's no easement recorded. It's closed." She had looked at him for a moment. She had said, "I don't think you understand. We've been using this road for a long time, 14 years, since before you owned the property." Ray had said, "I understand that. 14 years of use doesn't create a legal easement. The statutory period in Tennessee is 20 years. You're 6 years short." The directness had shifted slightly, the tone adjusting from misunderstanding to something more considered. She had said, "The previous owner never objected. Nobody ever told us we couldn't use it." Ray had said, "The previous owner also never granted an easement. His not objecting isn't the same as giving permission. The road is private property. The gate is staying locked." She had looked at the gate. She had looked at the no trespassing signs. She had looked back at Ray. She had said, "People are going to be very upset about this." Ray had said, "I understand that too." She had said, "We have been using this road for 14 years. Ray had said, "I heard you the first time. That doesn't give you a right to it." She had stood at the gate for another 10 seconds, the travel mug in her hand, the January cold around them, the track running east behind the locked gate toward the HOA subdivision's fence line, 0.6 miles away. Then she had walked back to the CRV, gotten in, and driven south on CR7. Ray had watched the taillights until they were gone. He had walked back to the travel trailer and had poured his coffee and had opened his field notebook to the page where he had written his Wednesday morning observations. He had added a new entry below the underlined notation. Sunday, January 14th, Donna Marsh, Pinecrest Estates resident, arrived at CR7 gate 7:51 a.m. Tried lock. Informed me residents have used track for 14 years. Informed me people would be upset. Departed 7:58 a.m. He had added one line below it. Begin title records review Monday. He had circled it. The gate was locked. The track was closed. The coffee was hot. The 99 acres ran quiet around the travel trailer in the January morning, the timber on the upper slope standing in the flat winter light, the creek audible in the pasture bottom, the track empty from the CR7 gate to the HOA fence line 0.6 miles east. It had been his property for 31 days. He already knew it was going to take longer than that to resolve. Not because the legal question was complicated. It was not complicated. It was the least complicated property rights question he had encountered in 31 years of right-of-way work. But because the legal question and the human question were different questions. And the human question was going to take as long as it took for Donna Marsh to understand that 14 years of using someone else's road without permission was not the same as owning it. He understood her frustration. He did not share it. He had spent 31 years learning the difference between what people used and what they owned. The deed said what it said. The County Road Classification Index said what it said. The Recorded Easement Index said what it said, which was nothing, because there was nothing recorded. He had one more thing to check. The county had files he had not yet requested. The road department records, the permit files, the agricultural exemption records. He had a sense, from 31 years of reading county files and right-of-way work, that a track in this condition, maintained gravel, cleared drainage, a formal gate installed at the HOA's end, had a paper trail somewhere that neither the deed records nor the classification index had yet revealed. He would request the files Monday. He would read everything. Donna had driven the long way to work on Sunday morning, south on CR7 to the County Road intersection, then east through the main subdivision entrance on Pinecrest Drive, the route adding 7 minutes to a commute she had been running at 4 minutes for the better part of a decade. She had timed the difference when she first discovered the shortcut in 2010, the calculation producing a result that had felt, at the time, like a minor gift from the geography of Crestwood County. 7 minutes each way, twice a day, 5 days a week. The accumulated arithmetic of the shortcut had saved her, over 14 years, something approaching 700 hours of driving time. She had never thought of it in those terms. She had simply used the track the way you use any route that works, without examining the foundation it rested on. She had arrived at her desk at 8:15 and had opened the Pinecrest Estates Community Forum on her laptop. She had typed for 11 minutes without stopping. The post had run to 4 paragraphs: the new owner, the gate, the locked padlock, the conversation at the CR7 boundary, the no trespassing signs posted at intervals along the track. She had described Ray Calloway as polite but unmovable, and had described the gate as an obstacle to a 14-year community practice that the new owner had no right to eliminate without notice or discussion. She had ended with, "I think the board needs to address this immediately. This road is how most of us get to work in the morning. It has been part of our community's daily life since before many of us moved here. I do not believe one person's purchase of a property gives him the right to simply close a road that an entire community has relied on for 14 years. She had posted it at 8:22 and had gone to make coffee. By 9 a.m. there had been 23 replies. By noon there had been 61. By Sunday evening, the thread had 94 posts, and Gerald Fitch had received 34 emails. Gerald had read the emails in sequence on Sunday evening. Sitting at the kitchen table in the house on Pinecrest Court he had owned since 2011, the emails sorted by arrival time, each one a variation on the same theme. The gate was an outrage. The board needed to act. 14 years of community use had to count for something. Somebody needed to call a lawyer. Gerald Fitch was 61 years old and had been HOA board president for 3 years because nobody else had wanted the position, and he had made the mistake of saying at a board meeting in 2020 that he thought the role required someone with a background in risk assessment. He had spent 30 years as an insurance adjuster. He understood risk. He did not particularly enjoy conflict. He had spent his career quantifying it, not navigating it personally, and he had found the HOA presidency to be a steady source of the specific variety of conflict he was least equipped to manage, the conflict that involved the community's collective emotion running ahead of its legal reality. He had read the 34 emails and had identified the legal reality question immediately: prescriptive easement. He knew the term. He had encountered prescriptive easement claims in property insurance files across 30 years of adjusting work. He knew enough to know that the theory existed and that it had requirements. He did not know what Tennessee's requirements were. He had called Bev Hollis Monday morning. Beverly Hollis had been practicing real estate law in Crestwood County for 19 years, a general real estate practice, residential and commercial transactions, title work, some HOA governance, the standard range of a practitioner in a county where the real estate bar was small and the work was varied. She was competent and methodical, and she had a specific quality that made her useful to HOA boards. She told clients what the law said before she told them what they wanted to hear. Gerald had explained the situation in 12 minutes. The 99 acres, the new owner, the gate, the 14 years of use, the community forum, the 34 emails. Bev had listened without interrupting. She had said, "Prescriptive easement. That's the theory you're looking for." Gerald had said, "That's what I thought. What does it require?" Bev had said, "In Tennessee, a prescriptive easement requires open, continuous, exclusive, and adverse use of the property for the statutory period. The use has to be without the owner's permission. If the owner gave permission, the use is not adverse. And it has to be for the full statutory period without interruption." Gerald had said, "What is the statutory period?" Bev had been quiet for 2 seconds. She had said, 20 years, Gerald had said. "The use started in 2009. That's 14 years. Bev had said, "Yes, you are 6 years short of the statutory period." Gerald had said, "So the theory doesn't work." Bev had said, "The theory has merit in its structure. The use appears to have been open, continuous, and adverse to the extent that the previous owner didn't grant permission. But the statutory period is 20 years, and 14 years does not satisfy it. A court applying Tennessee law cannot find a prescriptive easement on 14 years of use when the statute requires 20. Gerald had said, "Is there any argument around the statutory period?" Bev had said, "There are arguments at the margins, tacking, for instance, where you add periods of use by different parties together to reach the statutory period. But tacking requires privity between the parties, and a rotating population of HOA residents using a shortcut doesn't have the privity relationship that tacking requires. The statutory period argument is the HOA's primary weakness, and I don't see a clean way around it. Gerald had said, "I'll call you back." He had called Donna. The call had lasted 9 minutes. Gerald had explained Bev's analysis in 4, the prescriptive easement theory, the 20-year statutory period, the 14-year shortfall. He had been precise because he was an insurance adjuster, and precision was how he communicated risk. Donna had been quiet for 3 seconds. She had said, "File it anyway." Gerald had said, "Donna, the statutory period." She had said, "I heard you. File it anyway." 14 years is close to 20. A judge should be able to see that this community has relied on this road for 14 years, and that closing it causes real hardship. Gerald had said, "That's not how property law works. The statutory period is 20 years. 14 is not 20, regardless of the hardship." She had said, "Then let a judge decide that. File the claim. Send the new owner a letter. Make him understand that this community is not going to simply accept a locked gate without a fight." Gerald had said, "Donna." She had said, "Gerald, I have been on the social committee for 6 years. I have organized every community event this HOA has run since 2017. I am telling you that if the board does not take action on this, the community is going to lose confidence in the board's ability to represent its interests. File the claim." Gerald had been quiet for 4 seconds. He had then called Bev. Bev had drafted the letter over 2 days, a careful document, 4 pages, asserting the HOA's prescriptive easement claim on the basis of 14 years of open, continuous, and adverse use of the track by Pinecrest Estates residents, demanding the immediate removal of both gates and the no trespassing signs, and stating the HOA's intention to pursue legal action if the demand was not met within 21 days. She had written the letter with the knowledge that the statutory period argument weakened it. She had not omitted the 14-year figure. The letter stated it clearly, and she had not invented a tacking argument she did not believe in. She had made the strongest version of the available claim, and had sent it with the understanding that a competent opposing attorney would identify the statutory period problem within 10 minutes of reading the first page. The letter had arrived at Ray's travel trailer by certified mail on a Thursday, day 19 of Ray's ownership, 8 days after Donna's Sunday morning arrival at the gate. Ray had signed for the envelope at the CR7 gate, where the mail carrier had flagged him down during his morning fence line walk. He had carried it back to the trailer, poured coffee, and read it at the folding table inside. He had read it once through without stopping. He had then read it again, this time with a pen, noting the specific claims in the margins. The letter identified the prescriptive easement theory on page 1. It stated the 14 years of use on page 2. It demanded gate removal on page 3. It threatened legal action on page 4. Ray had written in the margin, next to the 14-year figure, TN statutory period, 20 years, short by 6. He had written next to the adverse use argument, Curtis Hale, no permission granted, but also no interruption claimed. Check county files. He had written next to the demand for gate removal, no. He had folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and called Lena Soto. Lena Soto had been Ray's first call after the gate went up, not because he needed legal help yet, but because Ray had spent 31 years in right-of-way acquisition, working alongside property attorneys, and had learned to identify the moment when a property question required a specialist. He had called Lena on day 7, the morning after Donna's visit to the gate, and had described the situation in the same precise terms he used when briefing a project team. The property, the track, the 14 years of use, the absence of a recorded easement, the HOA's gate installed at the eastern terminus, the tire track evidence of regular, ongoing use. Lena had listened and had said, "Prescriptive easement is their theory. 20-year statutory period in Tennessee. When did the use start?" Ray had said, 2009, based on the HOA gate's installation. It's a permanent gate, powder-coated, set in concrete. That kind of installation doesn't happen in year 1 of informal use. I'd date the regular use to 2009 or 2010. Lena had said, 14 or 15 years. They're short. Ray had said, I know. I want the complete county file before I respond to anything. Road department records, agricultural exemption records, permit files, anything that touches that track going back to 2007 when Hale bought the property. Lena had said, "I'll start the records requests Monday. What are you looking for specifically?" Ray had said, "I don't know yet. I'm looking for the document that tells me what that track actually is. Not what the HOA thinks it is, but what the county records say it is." In 31 years of right-of-way work, I never encountered a track in that condition. Maintained gravel, cleared drainage, a permanent gate at one end, that didn't have a paper trail somewhere. Lena had said, "I'll pull everything." Now, with Bev's letter in his hand, Ray had called Lena again. He had read her the key sections, the prescriptive easement claim, the 14-year use period, the demand for gate removal, the 21-day response window. Lena had said, "The statutory period argument alone defeats the claim. 14 years is 14 years. The statute is unambiguous. A court applying Tennessee law cannot find a prescriptive easement on a 14-year use period. Their attorney knows this." Ray had said, "She sent the letter anyway." Lena had said, "Clients sometimes make that decision. The letter creates pressure, even if the underlying theory is weak. It puts you in the position of either negotiating or litigating, and some clients calculate that the cost of litigation will make a negotiated compromise more attractive than winning on the merits." Ray had said, "I'm not interested in a negotiated compromise on a gate I have the legal right to close." Lena had said, "I know. I'm explaining their calculation." Ray had said, "What's the status of the county records requests?" Lena had said, "The road department responded this morning. Partial production, the road classification index, and the maintenance logs for the CR7 corridor. The agricultural exemption file and the permit records are still pending. I expect them by end of next week." Ray had said, "I want to see everything before you respond to the letter." Lena had said, "The 21-day window gives us time. I'll have the county records before the deadline." Ray had said, "Lena, I want the track's complete paper history. Everything the county has touched that track with, from the first maintenance log entry to the current classification. If that track has a history in the county's files, I want to know what it says before the HOA's attorney finds out we know." Lena had said, "Understood. I'll have the full production reviewed before we respond." The HOA forum had continued running in the background, the thread from Donna's Sunday post now at 140 replies. 3 new threads spun off addressing the prescriptive easement theory, the board's response, and a thread started by a resident named Phil Garrett at 42 Pinecrest Court, who had looked up Tennessee prescriptive easement law and posted a detailed summary that ended with, "The statutory period is 20 years. We started using the road in 2009. We are 6 years short. I don't know why Donna is telling us to fight this. The math doesn't work." Donna had replied to Phil's post within 20 minutes. "The math is not the only consideration. 14 years of community reliance creates a moral claim, even if the legal claim is imperfect. The board is pursuing this, and I trust they will find an argument that works." Phil had replied, "Moral claims don't win property disputes." The thread had continued for another 40 replies without resolving the disagreement. Gerald Fitch had read Phil's post and had agreed with it privately, and had not said so publicly because Donna had organized the community's 4th of July event for 6 consecutive years, and he did not want to be the board president who told her she was wrong in front of 140 forum participants. He had called Bev the same afternoon and had said, "Is there any argument we haven't considered?" Bev had said, "I've been thinking about implied dedication, the theory that the previous owner's long-term failure to object constituted an implied dedication of the tract to public use. But implied dedication in Tennessee requires an intent to dedicate, and silence or inaction alone doesn't establish intent. It's a weaker argument than prescriptive easement, and it has the same fundamental problem, the use period." Gerald had said, "So we have one argument and it's 6 years short." Bev had said, "That's an accurate summary of our position, yes." Gerald had said, "File the letter." Bev had said, "It's already sent." Gerald had looked at his email inbox, the 34 emails from the weekend, Donna's replies to Phil's forum post forwarded to him by 3 separate residents, a new email from a resident at 67 Pinecrest Boulevard asking whether the board had retained counsel. He had typed a reply to the 67 Pinecrest Boulevard resident that said, "The board has consulted with legal counsel and is pursuing all available options to restore community access to the CR7 shortcut. We will provide updates as the situation develops." He had read it back once and had sent it without changing anything. He had then looked at the window of his home office, the January afternoon outside, the subdivision's streets visible from this angle, the main Pinecrest Drive entrance in the distance. The shortcut was 0.6 miles west of where he sat, behind a locked gate on private property, and the attorney he had hired had told him in plain terms that the legal argument available to him was 6 years short of the statutory requirement, and that no clean workaround existed. He had noted, in the private mental accounting he maintained as a risk assessor, that the gap between what Donna believed the HOA was entitled to and what the law actually provided was the same gap he had spent 30 years measuring in insurance files, the gap between a claimant's sense of what was fair and the policy language that governed what was covered. The policy language, in his experience, always won. He suspected the deed records would have the same relationship to Donna's 14-year argument. He did not say this to anyone. He waited for Lena Soto's response to the demand letter and hoped that Bev would find, in the county's records, something that changed the calculation. She would not. But Ray already suspected that, and he had asked Lena to find, in the same county records, something that did not change the calculation, something that confirmed it, permanently and in writing, in a document that had been sitting in the county's files since 2009, unread by anyone connected to Pinecrest Estates, waiting for someone to look. Lena had submitted 4 public records requests on the Monday after Ray's call: the county deed office, the road department, the agricultural exemption office within the county assessor's division, and the county planning department's permit and survey files. She had sent each request by email with a follow-up fax, the fax being the format that Crestwood County's older departmental offices processed faster than email, a procedural detail she had learned in 8 years of pulling county records for property litigation. She had built her investigation the same way she had built every title examination in her career, not from a theory working backward to the documents, but from the documents forward to whatever conclusion the documents supported. She had learned the distinction in her years as a county title examiner, where the work required reading every recorded instrument in sequence without deciding in advance what the chain of title said. You read, you noted, you followed. The record told you what it was. She had started with what she already had. The deed records for parcel 11-0044-002 ran back to 1962 in the county's online index, the Presley family acquisition in that year, the chain running forward through 2 Presley generations to the 2007 sale to Curtis Eugene Hale, and then to Ray Calloway's December 2023 closing. She had pulled every instrument in the chain: the deeds, the estate transfers, the 2 Presley-era boundary adjustments from 1974 and 1988, and had read each one against the parcel's current legal description. Nothing in the chain granted an easement across the property's midsection. Nothing reserved an easement. Nothing referenced a road, a track, a right-of-way, or a public-use corridor of any kind, crossing the property from east to west. The chain of title was clean in the specific sense that it contained no encumbrance language and no easement language. The track did not exist in any recorded instrument as a legal right-of-way. She had noted it: chain of title, 1962 to present. No recorded easement, no right-of-way, no road reservation, no public use language. Track not referenced in any instrument. The road classification index had arrived Wednesday, the county road department's production of the CR7 corridor classification file. 22 pages, the road department's standard format for county road documentation. The index listed every road segment in the CR7 corridor by classification: county-maintained public road, state route, private road, unclassified. She had read the index from the CR7 northern terminus, south through the corridor to the county line. The track did not appear. The CR7 corridor listing showed the county road running south from the northern terminus, passing the intersection with parcel 11-0044-002's western boundary, and continuing south without any notation of a road, track, or right-of-way branching east from that intersection. The track's western end, the point where it met CR7 on Ray's property, was not classified as an intersection with any road in the county's system. It was not on the list because it was not a county road. She had noted it. Road Classification Index. Track not listed. No county road classification. No maintenance designation. No public road status. CR7 intersection with parcel western boundary, not recorded as a road junction. The maintenance logs had been more interesting. The road department's maintenance logs for the CR7 corridor covered 2004 through the current year. 20 years of grading records, drainage work, patching logs, and crew assignments for the county road and its adjacent properties. Lena had read the logs in sequence, looking for any maintenance entry that referenced the track or the intersection. She had found two. The first was a 2009 entry, March 14, 2009, a crew assignment for CR7 shoulder grading from mile marker 4.2 to mile marker 4.8. The entry's notes field contained one line. Grade extended approximately 200 feet east at mile marker 4.4 intersection. Assumed county road spur. Grading completed. Mile marker 4.4 was the precise location of the track's western end. The crew had graded the first 200 feet of the track, the portion of the track where it left CR7 and entered Ray's property, because a crew member had assumed the junction was a county road spur and had treated it accordingly. The grading had been done on March 14, 2009. The second maintenance log entry was dated September 22, 2009, 6 months later, a correction entry in the notes field of the MP 4.4 segment. Per County Road Director, intersection at milepost 4.4 is private property access, not county road spur. No future maintenance. Remove from active corridor. Someone had told the county road department that the track was private. The department had corrected its records and removed the track from its maintenance scope. Lena had written in her notes, 2009 maintenance log. Crew graded first 200 feet of track in March 2009. Assumed county road spur. September 2009 correction. Road director notified crew it was private property access, removed from maintenance. Who notified the road director? She had circled the question and had moved to the agricultural exemption file. The agricultural exemption file had arrived Thursday, the county assessor's production of Curtis Hale's exemption records for parcel 11-0044-002, 14 annual certifications from 2009 through 2022, each one submitted by Curtis Hale from his Phoenix address, each one certifying that the parcel was in active agricultural use as a timber management tract and qualified for the county's agricultural use tax exemption. Lena had read each certification in sequence. The certifications were standard forms: parcel number, owner name, agricultural use description, owner signature, date. The agricultural use description on each form was identical: mixed hardwood and pine timber tract, active timber management, selective harvesting program ongoing. Curtis had been claiming an agricultural exemption on a timber tract he had not visited since the mid-2000s, filing the annual certification from Phoenix, maintaining the exemption status, paying reduced property taxes on the classification. The exemption was legal. The filing was accurate in the sense that the timber was on the property regardless of whether Curtis visited it, but it established a paper record of Curtis's ongoing ownership attention. He was not an absent owner in the legal sense. He was a remote owner who maintained his tax status and filed annual certifications and paid his taxes and owned the land in every legal sense that mattered. The certifications confirmed the ownership record. They did not answer Lena's question about who had told the road director the track was private in September 2009. She had moved to the permit file. The County Planning Department's permit file for parcel 11-0044-002 had been the thinnest production, 6 pages, the permits issued against the parcel since 2000. There were no building permits. There were no grading permits. There was one permit of interest, a 2007 agricultural access road permit issued to Curtis Hale in October of that year, authorizing the installation of a gravel farm road on the parcel for agricultural access purposes. The permit described the road's location in general terms: east-west alignment, central portion of parcel, and its purpose: farm vehicle access for timber management operations. Curtis had permitted the track himself in 2007. It was his road. He had built it. He had permitted it as a farm road for timber management access. It was an agricultural access road, not a public road, not a right-of-way, not a community shortcut. It was a timber management track that Curtis had installed 2 years before Pinecrest Estates residents began using it. Lena had written in her notes, "Track origin, agricultural access road permit, Curtis Hale, October 2007. Installed as private farm road for timber management. Predates HOA use by 2 years. HOA began using a private farm road without the owner's permission or knowledge, and the owner had documented the road's private purpose in a county permit before the use began. She had then looked again at the September 2009 maintenance log entry, the road director's correction note, the removal of the track from the county's maintenance scope, the notation that it was private property access. Someone had told the road director in or before September 2009. The planning department's permit file had not answered the question. The road department's file had not answered it. She had submitted a follow-up request to the road department for correspondence files, letters, emails, or memoranda in the MP 4.4 corridor file from 2009, on Thursday afternoon. The production had arrived Friday morning. It was 11 pages, the road department's correspondence file for the CR7 corridor at and near mile marker 4.4, covering 2008 through 2011. Most of it was routine: maintenance request forms, contractor invoices, a 2010 bridge inspection report for the CR7 culvert at mile marker 4.1. Page 7 was the document. It was a letter, 1 page, dated August 19, 2009, from Curtis Eugene Hale of 4417 East Camelback Road, Phoenix, Arizona, addressed to the Crestwood County Road Department, Attention Road Director. The letter's subject line read, Private Farm Road, Parcel 11-0044-002, CR7 Vicinity, mile marker 4.4. Lena had read it twice before she set it down. Curtis had written, I am the owner of Parcel 11-0044-002 in Crestwood County, Tennessee, located on the western side of County Road 7 at approximately mile marker 4.4. I am writing because I have been informed by a neighbor that a county road maintenance crew graded a portion of my private farm road earlier this year, apparently under the mistaken impression that the road was a county road spur. I want to clarify the status of this road for the county's records. The road in question is a private farm road that I constructed in 2007 under Agricultural Access Road Permit number AGR-2007-114, issued by the Crestwood County Planning Department. It is located entirely within my property boundaries, runs east to west across the central portion of the parcel, and was built for my personal use in managing the timber resources on the property. It is not a county road. It is not a public right-of-way. It is not open to public use of any kind. I have also been informed that residents of the Pinecrest Estates subdivision, which borders my property on the east, have been using this road as a cut-through to reach County Road 7. I did not authorize this use, and I was not aware of it until recently. The road is private property, and its use by subdivision residents or any other members of the public is not permitted. I am requesting that the county correct its records to reflect that this road is a private farm road and not a county road or public right-of-way, and that no future county maintenance be performed on it. I am also requesting that this letter be placed in the county's permanent file for this road segment, so that the road's private status is documented in the county's records. I intend to address the unauthorized use by subdivision residents directly, but I wanted the county's records to be correct first. The letter was signed, Curtis E. Hale, owner, Parcel 11-0044-002. It had been received by the Road Department on August 24, 2009, the receipt stamp visible in the upper right corner. The road director had written in the margin, correct records, private access, not county road, remove from maintenance, file letter permanently. The correction had been entered in the maintenance log on September 22, 2009. Curtis had written the letter in August 2009. The HOA residents had begun using the track in 2009, the same year. The letter established that Curtis had known about the unauthorized use in 2009, had declared the road private in writing to a county agency, had explicitly stated that the use was not authorized, and had filed the declaration permanently in the county's public records. The prescriptive easement theory required adverse use that was hostile to the owner's interest, without the owner's permission or acknowledgement. The adverse use clock, if it had started at all when HOA residents first drove the track in 2009, had been interrupted in the same year by the owner's affirmative written declaration that the road was private and the use was unauthorized. The adverse use clock had never run uninterrupted for a single year. 14 years meant nothing if the first year was interrupted by the owner's own public declaration. Lena had read the letter a third time and had called Ray. Ray had been on the property's northeastern ridge with Harlan Webb when the call came, the two of them assessing the loblolly pine stand, Harlan marking the sawlog quality trees with flagging tape, while Ray walked the stand's perimeter. Ray had stepped away from the pine stand to take the call, the January afternoon cold on the ridge, the county visible in 3 directions from the elevation. Lena had said, "Ray, I have the document." Ray had said, "Tell me." She had said, Curtis Hale wrote a letter to the Crestwood County Road Department in August 2009. 1 page. Subject line, Private Farm Road, parcel 11-0044-002. He wrote it because a county crew had graded the first 200 feet of the track in March 2009, and he found out about it, and because he had also found out that HOA residents were using the track. He told the county the road was private, not a public right-of-way, not open to public use, built under a 2007 agricultural permit for his personal timber management use. He told the county the HOA's use was not authorized. He asked the county to correct its records and file the letter permanently. Ray had been quiet for 3 seconds. Lena had said, "The county filed it. It has been in the road department's correspondence file since August 2009. It is a public record. It has been available to anyone who requested the file for 14 years. Ray had said, "And the prescriptive easement theory." Lena had said, "It fails at the foundation. Prescriptive easement requires adverse use, open, continuous, hostile, and without the owner's permission or acknowledgement. Curtis's letter is an affirmative, written, publicly filed declaration that the road was private and the HOA's use was not authorized. He made that declaration in 2009, the same year the use began. The adverse use clock, if it started at all in 2009, was interrupted in 2009 by the owner's own public filing. You cannot have continuous adverse use for 14 years when the owner filed a written declaration of the road's private status and the unauthorized character of the use in year 1. Ray had said, the HOA's attorney based the prescriptive easement claim on 14 years of open, continuous adverse use. Lena had said, the use was open, the use was continuous, the use was not adverse, or if it was adverse, the adverse period was interrupted by Curtis's letter in 2009. The HOA's theory depends on 14 years of uninterrupted adverse use. The Curtis Hale letter breaks that chain in the first year. Ray had said, "Where is the letter now?" Lena had said, "In the County Road Department's permanent correspondence file for the CR7 corridor. It is a public record. I have a certified copy. I requested the certification when the production arrived this morning." Ray had said, "Attach it to a file memo and send it to me today." Lena had said, "Already done. It's in your email." Ray had said, "What does this do to their demand letter?" Lena had said, "It ends their claim. The statutory period argument alone defeats it. The Curtis Hale letter defeats it independently, on a different ground. Not just that 14 years is less than 20, but that the use was never legally adverse in the first place, because the owner filed a written declaration of the road's private status, and the use's unauthorized character before the adverse use period could accumulate. 2 independent grounds, either one sufficient. Together, they are a complete answer to everything in Bev Hollis's letter." Ray had said, "Write the response, use both grounds, quote the statute, quote the letter, attach the letter as an exhibit. I want Bev Hollis to read a response that tells her the document has been in the county's files for 14 years and was available to her before she sent the demand." Lena had said, "I'll have a draft to you by Wednesday." Ray had said, Lena, did Curtis ever follow through on addressing the unauthorized use directly? He said in the letter he intended to. Lena had said, nothing in the county's record shows any further action. No cease and desist, no lawsuit, no recorded notice of any kind beyond the 2009 letter. He wrote the letter, filed it, and apparently did nothing further. The HOA kept using the track, and Curtis apparently decided from Phoenix that the filing was sufficient, or that pursuing it further wasn't worth his time from 1,800 miles away. Ray had said, so the filing sat in the county's records for 14 years, while the HOA ran their commute across his property. Lena had said, that is exactly what happened. Ray had been quiet for a moment, standing on the ridge in the January afternoon, the pine stand behind him, the county spread below, the track visible at this elevation as a thin line crossing the property's midsection from the HOA's fence line to the CR7 intersection. He had said, how many HOA residents do you think pulled the road department's correspondence file for the CR7 corridor before they filed their prescriptive easement claim? Lena had said, I think we know the answer to that. Ray had said, the document was always there. Lena had said, it was always there, in a public file, available on request. Curtis Hale asked the county to file it permanently, and the county did exactly that. Ray had said, I'll read the draft response Wednesday. He had ended the call and had stood on the ridge for a moment, looking at the track below. The gate at the CR7 end was visible from this elevation, the galvanized steel, the padlock, the no trespassing sign catching the afternoon light. The gate at the eastern end was not visible from here, but he knew where it sat, at the HOA's fence line, matching lock, matching signs, the powder-coated HOA gate on the other side of the fence that the community had installed at some point during 14 years of using a road whose owner had told the county in writing in 2009 that it was private and the use was not permitted. The document had been there since August 2009. Curtis had asked for it to be filed permanently. It had been filed permanently. It had waited 14 years for someone to look. Lena had sent Ray the draft response on Wednesday afternoon. 12 pages. The document structured in the same sequence as Beb's demand letter, but working in the opposite direction. Each of Beb's assertions met with the specific record that answered it. Ray had read it at the folding table in the travel trailer that evening, a cup of coffee at his elbow, his field notebook open to the page where he had written his margin notes on Beb's letter 3 weeks earlier. He had read Lena's draft against his margin notes, checking that each of the points he had flagged was addressed, confirming that the Curtis Hale letter was quoted correctly, verifying that the exhibit references matched the attachments Lena had listed at the end of the document. He had called her at 8 p.m. with 4 editorial notes. 2 were word choice adjustments. 1 was a request to add the agricultural permit number from the 2007 Planning Department file to the paragraph describing the track's origin, and 1 was a suggestion to move the Curtis Hale letter discussion from the response's 3rd section to its 2nd, immediately after the statutory period argument, so that a reader who might have dismissed the 20-year period problem as a technicality would encounter the 2009 letter before they had recovered from the statutory argument. Lena had said, you want the letter to land before they've finished processing the first hit. Ray had said, I want the letter to land when they're already off balance. The statutory period argument tells them their theory doesn't reach the finish line. The Curtis Hale letter tells them the race was never valid to begin with. The sequence matters. Lena had said, I'll restructure it. Final version tomorrow morning. The response had gone out by certified mail and email on Thursday, addressed to Beverly Hollis at her law office address, copied to the Pinecrest Estates HOA board at its registered address. Lena had also sent a courtesy copy to Gerald Fitch personally at the residential address listed in the HOA's annual filing with the Tennessee Secretary of State's office, a procedural detail that ensured the board president received the document directly rather than through whatever filter Bev might apply when she communicated its contents. The response's opening section addressed the statutory period in 4 paragraphs. The Tennessee prescriptive easement statute cited by its code section, the 20-year requirement stated plainly, the HOA's claimed use period of 14 years noted, and the arithmetic completed. The HOA's demand letter claims prescriptive easement rights based on 14 years of use. Tennessee Code Annotated Section 28-2-103 requires 20 years of continuous adverse use to establish a prescriptive easement. 14 years is not 20 years. The HOA's prescriptive easement claim fails on the statutory period requirement, regardless of any other analysis, and no court applying Tennessee law can find a prescriptive easement on 14 years of use when the statute is unambiguous. The second section had opened with the Curtis Hale letter. Lena had quoted the letter's operative paragraphs in full. The declaration that the road was private, the statement that it was not a public right-of-way, the explicit acknowledgement that the HOA's use was not authorized, and Curtis's request that the letter be permanently filed in the county's records. She had then written the legal analysis in terms that Bev Hollis would recognize immediately, and that Gerald Fitch would understand without a law degree. Prescriptive easement requires that the claimant's use be adverse and hostile to the owner's interest, meaning the use must occur without the owner's permission, consent, or acknowledgement, and must continue without interruption for the full statutory period. Curtis Hale's August 19, 2009 letter, filed permanently in the Crestwood County Road Department's public records and attached hereto as Exhibit A, constitutes an affirmative, written, and publicly recorded declaration by the owner of record that 1. The track is a private farm road. 2. It is not a public right-of-way. 3. It is not open to public use. And 4. The HOA's use of the road was not authorized and was not known to the owner until 2009. This letter was filed in August 2009, the same year that Pinecrest Estates residents began using the track, and the same year that Mr. Hale first became aware of the unauthorized use. The letter establishes that the owner of record explicitly declared the road's private status and the unauthorized character of the HOA's use before the adverse use period could accumulate. Under Tennessee law, an owner's affirmative declaration of a road's private status, particularly when filed in a public county record as Mr. Hale specifically requested, constitutes an interruption of any adverse use period. The adverse use clock, if it began at all in 2009, was interrupted in 2009 by the owner's own publicly filed declaration. The HOA cannot simultaneously claim that A. The use was adverse and hostile to the owner's interest, and B. The owner filed a written declaration acknowledging the use and declaring it unauthorized in the first year of the claimed adverse use period. These positions are incompatible. If the owner knew of the use in 2009 and filed a public declaration of the road's private status, the use was not quietly adverse to an unknowing owner. It was a known trespass that the owner documented and publicly recorded. The third section addressed the road classification records. The county's road index showing no classification for the track, the maintenance logs showing the March 2009 grading error, and the September 2009 correction. The road director's notation removing the track from the county's maintenance scope. Lena had written, "The track has never been classified as a county road, a public road, or a right-of-way in Crestwood County's road classification index. The county's only maintenance of the track was a 2009 grading error, performed under the mistaken assumption that the track was a county road spur, and subsequently corrected when the road director was informed of the track's private status. The correction directly traceable to Mr. Hale's August 2009 letter." The fourth section addressed the 2011 aerial survey, the county planning department's aerial photography program that had documented Crestwood County's land use in 2011. The survey images showing parcel 11-0044-002, with the track labeled in the planning department's land use notation as private agricultural access road. The label had been applied by the planning department's GIS staff based on the agricultural access road permit in the county's files, the 2007 permit Curtis had pulled before he built the track. The aerial survey label was not a legal determination, but it was a county agency's contemporaneous characterization of the track's status, and it matched every other document in the file. The final section was the demand response. 3 numbered items, each one stated without qualification. 1. Mr. Calloway will not remove the gates installed at the eastern and western boundaries of the track on parcel 11-0044-002. The gates are lawfully installed on private property and will remain in place. 2. The HOA's prescriptive easement claim is without legal merit for the independent reasons set forth above. Mr. Calloway reserves all rights with respect to any legal action the HOA may choose to file, and will defend any such action vigorously. 3. Mr. Calloway requests that the HOA instruct its members to cease trespassing on Parcel 1-1-0044-002, and to use the subdivision's designated public road access points exclusively. Lena had attached 4 exhibits: the Curtis Hale letter as Exhibit A, the County Road Classification Index excerpt as Exhibit B, the 2009 Maintenance Log Correction entry as Exhibit C, and the 2011 Aerial Survey Land Use Notation as Exhibit D. Each exhibit was a certified copy, the certification stamps visible on the document faces. Bev had received the response on a Friday morning. She had been at her desk when the email arrived. Lena Soto's name in the sender field, the subject line reading R.E., Pinecrest Estates HOA versus Calloway, response to demand letter. She had opened the email, noted the 12-page attachment and the 4 exhibits, and had cleared her afternoon calendar before she began reading. She had read the statutory period section without surprise. She had known the 20-year problem when she drafted the demand letter, and had told Gerald as much. The statutory argument was clean, and she had no answer to it that she had not already considered and dismissed. She had made a note in the margin of her printed copy. Statutory, no viable response, expected. She had then read the Curtis Hale letter. She had read it once, quickly, the way you read a document when you are trying to understand its shape before you assess its substance. She had then read it again, slowly, the way you read a document when you are trying to find the problem with it and are not finding the problem. The letter was dated August 19, 2009. It was addressed to the Crestwood County Road Department. It was signed by Curtis Hale. Its subject line identified the track by parcel number and location. It stated, in plain language, that the road was private, that it was not a public right-of-way, that it was not open to public use, and that the HOA's use was not authorized. It asked the county to file it permanently. The county had filed it permanently. Bev had looked at the exhibit stamp on the certified copy, the County Road Department certification seal, the date of certification, the certifying officer's signature. The document was real. It was what it appeared to be. It had been in the county's files since August 2009. She had written in the margin, "This is a significant problem." The legal analysis had been correct. Lena's framing of the adverse use interruption was sound. Prescriptive easement required continuous, uninterrupted adverse use. An owner's affirmative public declaration of a road's private status and the unauthorized character of the use, filed in a public county record in the first year of the claimed adverse use period, was a textbook interruption of the adverse use clock. It did not matter that Curtis had never physically confronted anyone, never installed his own gate, never taken legal action. He had filed a public declaration. He had put the county's permanent records on notice. The declaration was the legal act, and it was sufficient. Bev had sat with the letter for 20 minutes before she called Gerald. Gerald had been at his kitchen table when the call came. A Saturday morning, the weekends quiet around him. The HOA forum thread visible on his laptop showing 178 posts and climbing. Bev had said, "Gerald, I've read the response. I need to walk you through it." Gerald had said, "How bad is it?" Bev had said, "The statutory period argument is what I expected. We knew that problem going in. The document is the new development." The property's previous owner, Curtis Hale, wrote a letter to the Crestwood County Road Department in August 2009. The letter declared the track a private farm road, stated it was not a public right-of-way, stated the HOA's use was not authorized, and asked the county to file the letter permanently in its records. The county filed it. It has been in the road department's public records since 2009. Gerald had said, "Curtis Hale knew about the use." Bev had said, "He found out in 2009, the same year the use began. He found out because a county crew had graded the first 200 feet of the track by mistake, and he learned about it from a neighbor." In the same letter where he corrected the county's records, he stated that he had also learned the HOA was using the track, and that the use was not authorized. Gerald had said, "And the easement theory." Bev had said, "The prescriptive easement theory requires adverse use that is hostile to the owner's interest, without the owner's consent or acknowledgement. continuing without interruption. The Curtis Hale letter is an affirmative, written, publicly filed declaration by the owner that the road was private and the use was unauthorized. Filed in 2009, the first year of the claimed adverse use period. Under Tennessee law, that declaration interrupts the adverse use clock. The HOA cannot claim continuous, uninterrupted adverse use for 14 years when the owner filed a public declaration of the use's unauthorized character in year 1. Gerald had said nothing for 5 seconds. Bev had said, the two arguments together, the statutory period and the Curtis Hale letter, are independent grounds, either one sufficient to defeat the prescriptive easement claim. Together, they are a complete answer. I do not have a viable legal argument that overcomes both of them. Gerald had said, Donna is going to ask me to find another argument. Bev had said, I know. I want you to understand the legal position before that conversation. There is no argument that overcomes the statutory period problem and the Curtis Hale letter simultaneously. Those two facts are the record, and I cannot make the record say something different. Gerald had said, I'll call you after I talk to Donna. The call with Donna had lasted 16 minutes and had been the most uncomfortable conversation Gerald had managed as board president. He had explained the statutory period argument in 3 minutes, the 20-year requirement, the 14-year use period, the 6-year shortfall. Donna had said she understood the math. He had then explained the Curtis Hale letter. Donna had been quiet for 4 seconds. She had said, he wrote a letter. Gerald had said, in 2009, to the county road department, declaring the track private and stating that the HOA's use was not authorized. The county filed it permanently. It has been in the county's public record since 2009. Donna had said, and we didn't know about it. Gerald had said, no one checked the county road department's correspondence files. Donna had said, find another argument. Gerald had said, Donna, I've asked Bev to find another argument. She has reviewed the navigability theory, not applicable to a land-based road. The implied dedication theory requires affirmative intent to dedicate, which the 2009 letter specifically contradicts. The tacking theory requires privity between successive users, which a rotating HOA resident population doesn't have. There is no argument that overcomes both the statutory period and the Curtis Hale letter. Bev has been direct with me about this. Donna had said, there has to be something. 14 years of community use has to count for something legally. Gerald had said, 14 years of community use counts as exactly 14 years, 6 years less than the statutory requirement, in a period that the owner interrupted with a public declaration in year 1. That is what it counts as legally. I understand it feels like it should count for more. It does not. Donna had said, what about hardship? Can't a court consider the hardship to 312 households? Gerald had said, property law doesn't have a hardship exception to the prescriptive easement statutory period. A court applies the statute. The statute says 20 years. Donna had said, this is unacceptable. Gerald had said, I know. I'm telling you what the law says. Donna had said, keep looking. There has to be an argument we haven't found. Gerald had ended the call and had sat at his kitchen table for a long moment, looking at the HOA forum thread on his laptop. 178 posts, the thread still active. A resident named Carol at 12 Pinecrest Way, asking in a new post whether the board had received a response to the demand letter yet. He had called Bev. He had said, Donna wants you to keep looking. Bev had said, I've been looking since the response arrived. I've reviewed the implied dedication theory, the tacking theory, the estoppel theory, the argument that Callaway should be estopped from closing the road because the community relied on it. The estoppel theory is the most sympathetic argument, but it has a significant problem. Estoppel requires reliance on a representation by the party to be estopped. Callaway never represented anything to the HOA. He bought the property and installed a gate. There's no estoppel without a representation, and he made none. Gerald had said, Donna will ask me about estoppel when I tell her we've considered it. Bev had said, tell her the analysis. Estoppel requires a representation by the defendant. Callaway made no representation. The theory doesn't apply. Gerald had said, I'll tell her. He had not called Donna back that afternoon. He had let the forum thread run to 200 posts over the weekend, reading it without posting, watching the community's frustration accumulate in the thread. noting that Phil Garrett at 42 Pinecrest Court had posted a second analysis that correctly identified the Curtis Hale letter's legal significance after finding a reference to the road department's response in Lena's response letter, which had been shared on the forum by a resident who had received the courtesy copy sent to the HOA's registered address. Phil had written, "I found the Curtis Hale letter reference in Callaway's attorney's response. Curtis Hale told the county in 2009 that the road was private and our use was unauthorized. That letter has been in the county's public records for 14 years. Our attorney sent a demand letter based on a prescriptive easement theory without checking whether the county had any records about this road. I think the board needs to explain how this happened." The post had 31 replies by Sunday evening. The petition had arrived at Ray's CR7 gate on a Tuesday, delivered by a Pinecrest Estates resident named Marcus Webb at 9 Pinecrest Court, who had driven to the gate, found it locked as expected, and had folded the petition document and tucked it through the gate's steel bars. Ray had found it during his Tuesday morning fence line walk, the folded document wedged in the gate's frame, the January wind having not yet dislodged it. He had pulled it free and had unfolded it at the gate. It was 3 pages, a cover letter on Pinecrest Estates HO, a letterhead, signed by Donna Marsh as social committee chair, and 2 pages of signature lines. The cover letter read, "We, the undersigned residents of Pinecrest Estates, respectfully demand the immediate removal of the gates installed on the track connecting Pinecrest Estates' western access point to County Road 7. This track has served our community for 14 years, and its closure has caused significant hardship to our residents. We ask that Mr. Callaway restore community access immediately and enter into good faith discussions with the HOA regarding a permanent access arrangement." There were 87 signatures. Ray had read the cover letter once. He had read the signature list, 87 names and addresses, each one a Pinecrest Estates resident. The addresses running through the Pinecrest Court, Pinecrest Drive, and Pinecrest Way street grid of the subdivision. He had folded the petition and had carried it back to the travel trailer. He had opened the document storage box he kept on the trailer's fold-down shelf, the box where he kept his field notebooks, the certified mail receipts, his copies of the deed and the chain of title, and the county records Lena had been producing in sequential productions. He had placed the petition in the box, between the copy of Bev Hollis's demand letter and the copy of Lena's response. He had labeled it in his field notebook, Tuesday, January 30th, petition received at CR7 gate, 87 signatures, Donna Marsh, social committee chair, filed. He had not called Lena about the petition. It was not a legal document. It was not a demand. It was not a filing. It had no legal significance in a prescriptive easement analysis. 87 signatures expressing a community's preference did not alter a statutory period, did not retroactively convert a known trespass into adverse use, and did not address the Curtis Hale letter's existence in the county's permanent records. It was, however, a document, and Ray Callaway filed documents. He had gone back to his fence line walk, the northern boundary, the section nearest the HOA's fence line where the 2 properties met, and where the HOA's powder-coated gate sat locked on their side of the fence, a matching padlock on Ray's side, 0.6 miles away at the CR7 end. He had walked the fence line in the January morning, noting the post condition and the wire tension, making notes in the field notebook that he would work from when he began the fence repair program in February. The 99 acres ran quiet around him. The timber on the upper slope, the creek in the pasture bottom, the track crossing the midsection from east to west, with its gravel surface and its cleared drainage ditches, and its permanent agricultural access road permit in the county's planning files, and its 14 years of HOA commuter traffic, and its 2009 letter in the county road department's permanent records, and its 2 locked gates, 1 at each end, and its no trespassing signs at 200-foot intervals, and the 87 signature petition in Ray's document box that changed none of those facts. He had finished the fence line walk at 11 a.m. and had called Lena. He had said, "What is the next step?" Lena had said, "They have 21 days from the date they received our response to either make a new demand, file a lawsuit, or go quiet. The 21 days runs Thursday. If they file a lawsuit, we respond and proceed to the quiet title action. I think we should file first. If they go quiet, we give it 2 weeks, and then file the quiet title action to establish the record permanently. Ray had said, "File first." Lena had said, "Before the 21 days runs." Ray had said, "The Curtis Hale letter has been in the county's permanent records since 2009. The track has never been a public road. The prescriptive easement theory fails on two independent grounds. I want a court order saying so on the record before this goes any further. File the quiet title action." Lena had said, "I'll have the complaint ready Monday." Ray had said, "I want the Curtis Hale letter as the complaint's central exhibit, not buried in the attachments, quoted in the body of the complaint, the full operative paragraphs, the filing date, the county's receipt stamp, the road director's margin notation. I want the judge to read it in the complaint before they read anything else." Lena had said, "It will be Exhibit 1, and I'll quote it in the complaint's facts section, front and center." Ray had said, "File it Monday." He had ended the call and had looked at the gate from the travel trailer window. The galvanized steel, the padlock, the no trespassing sign in the January afternoon. The gate was working correctly. It had been working correctly since day 6. Nothing Donna Marsh had organized, nothing Bev Hollis had argued, and nothing 87 signatures on 3 pages of petition paper had changed about the gate's legal status or its physical position. The complaint would be filed Monday. The record would say what it said. Lena had filed the complaint on Monday morning at 9:15. Ray Calloway versus Pinecrest Estates Homeowners Association, Incorporated, Crestwood County Circuit Court, case number CV-2024-0112, assigned by the clerk's office at 9:22. The complaint was 14 pages. Lena had structured it the way Ray had asked. The Curtis Hale letter quoted in the facts section before anything else. Its operative paragraphs reproduced in full before the complaint reached its legal claims. A judge reading a quiet title complaint for the first time would form an impression in the first 3 pages. She wanted that impression shaped by the 2009 letter. The facts section had opened with the property, the chain of title, Ray's December 2023 acquisition, the 2007 agricultural access road permit establishing the track's origin as a private farm road built by the previous owner for timber management. It had then quoted Curtis Hale's letter in full, all 4 substantive paragraphs, the subject line, the date, the Phoenix return address, the county's receipt stamp, the road director's margin notation directing the track's removal from the maintenance scope. Below the quotation, Lena had written, "This letter has been in the Crestwood County Road Department's permanent public records since August 24, 2009. It was available to the Pinecrest Estates HOA and its legal counsel before the HOA submitted its January 2024 demand letter, asserting a prescriptive easement claim. It establishes, in the owner of record's own words, that the track was private, that no public right-of-way existed, and that the HOA's use was unauthorized as of 2009, the first year of the HOA's claimed adverse use period. The legal claims asserted 3 causes of action: quiet title, declaratory judgment, and trespass. The quiet title claim asked the court to declare that no easement of any kind encumbered parcel 11-0044-002, and that the HOA held no legal right to use the track. The declaratory judgment claim asked for a court declaration that the gates were lawfully installed and could not be compelled removed. The trespass claim documented post-gate vehicle use from Ray's field notebook, 4 specific observations with dates, times, and vehicle descriptions, 6 exhibits, the Curtis Hale letter, the chain of title instruments, the 2007 agricultural permit, the road classification index excerpt, the 2009 maintenance log entries, and the 2011 aerial survey notation, each one certified. Service had been effected on Gerald Fitch at 2:17 p.m. the same day. Bev had read the complaint Monday evening and had called Gerald Tuesday morning. She had said, "The complaint is well constructed. The Curtis Hale letter is quoted in full in the facts section. The judge will read it before anything else. The agricultural permit establishes the track's origin as a private farm road. The trespass claim documents post-gate vehicle use with specific dates." Gerald had said, "Can we get it dismissed before a hearing?" Bev had said, "A motion to dismiss attacks legal sufficiency, not factual disputes. The quiet title claim is legally viable on its face. We'll answer and assert the prescriptive easement as an affirmative defense. The court will set a hearing. Gerald had said, "What are our chances?" Bev had been quiet for 3 seconds. She had said, "The statutory period argument alone is very difficult to overcome. 20 years is 20 years, and we have 14. The Curtis Hale letter compounds it substantially. The adverse use element requires use hostile to the owner's interest without the owner's knowledge or consent. The letter establishes that the owner knew about the use in 2009, declared it unauthorized, and filed that declaration in a public record. A judge applying Tennessee law to those facts is going to find it very difficult to conclude that the use was adverse and uninterrupted." Gerald had said, "So we go to a hearing we are likely to lose." Bev had said, "That is my honest assessment." Gerald had said, "File the answer." Bev had filed on the last day of the response period, 12 pages, denying the key factual allegations, asserting the prescriptive easement as the primary affirmative defense. She had addressed the Curtis Hale letter by arguing that a letter to a county agency was not formal legal notice to the users, and that Curtis's failure to take any action beyond filing the letter suggested it did not reflect a serious assertion of the road's private status. She had filed it knowing the argument was thin. A county public records filing was a public act. The proposition that it was legally irrelevant because it was addressed to the county rather than the HOA was not a proposition Tennessee property law supported. The court had set a hearing, March 14, 2024, 8 weeks out. The complaint was now on the public docket. The Curtis Hale letter, as Exhibit 1 to a filed circuit court complaint, was available to anyone who accessed the court's online filing system. Donna had accessed it Wednesday. She had read all 14 pages and all 6 exhibits. She had read Curtis's words, "The road is private property, and its use by subdivision residents or any other members of the public is not permitted." And she had read the date and the county's receipt stamp. She had then done what Donna Marsh did when a legal document told her something she did not want to hear. She moved the conflict to a different arena. On Thursday morning, she had filed a complaint with the Crestwood County Commissioner's Office, a 2-page letter asserting that the county had failed its duty to maintain public road access in the CR7 corridor, and requesting the commissioner's intervention. The complaint cited the 2009 county crew grading of the track's western section as evidence that the county had historically treated the track as a public road. It did not mention the September 2009 maintenance log correction, or the road director's notation removing the track from the maintenance scope. The commissioner's office had forwarded it to the county road director. The road director's office had responded within 3 days. The track was a private access road, documented in the county's permanent records. The county had no maintenance obligation or jurisdictional authority over private roads. Donna had posted about the commissioner complaint on the HOA forum. 48 replies, the community divided. Phil Garrett at 42 Pinecrest Court, pointing out in the thread that the road director's response was exactly what the county's records predicted. The following Tuesday, she had submitted a letter to the Crestwood County Gazette, 400 words, the track closure described as an abuse of property rights, the new owner characterized as an outsider who had purchased the property to deprive the community of an established access route. The letter had not mentioned the Curtis Hale letter, the agricultural permit, or the 20-year statutory period. The Gazette had published it Thursday. A retired county attorney named Harmon Bell had submitted a response the following week, 300 words, precise and unsparing, noting that the track was a private farm road documented as such since 2007, that the owner's title was clean back to 1962, and that a prescriptive easement on 14 years of use was legally impossible under Tennessee's 20-year requirement. Both letters had run on the same page. The social media campaign had started the same week, a Facebook group called Save Our Shortcut, created by a resident named Kim Alford at 33 Pinecrest Way. The group had 94 members in its first 48 hours and 140 by end of the first week. The hashtag, Save Our Shortcut, had appeared on the county's community Facebook page, the Neighborhood Next Door platform, and a local interest Instagram account. 3 posts had used photographs of the locked gate, the galvanized steel, the padlock, the no trespassing signs, framed as documentation of an injustice. None of the posts had mentioned the Curtis Hale letter. None had mentioned the 20-year statutory period. Phil Garrett had joined the group and had posted the full text of the Curtis Hale letter with a comment. "I think everyone in this group should read this before we go further. This letter has been in the county's records since 2009. It changes the legal picture significantly." 6 likes, no replies. Donna had deleted it. Phil had reposted it with a screenshot of the deletion. 34 likes. Ray had been aware of the commissioner complaint, the Gazette letter, and the Facebook group in the peripheral way that a man becomes aware of activity directed at him that he has no intention of engaging. He had heard about the commissioner complaint from Lena. He had seen the Gazette letter at the feed store in the county seat. He had been told about the Facebook group by Harlan Webb during a timber follow-up meeting on the northeastern ridge. Harlan had said, "You know there's a Facebook group." Ray had said, "I've heard." Harlan had said, "They're calling it Save Our Shortcut. You going to respond to any of it?" Ray had looked at the timber stand around them, the loblolly pine, the flagged sawlog trees, the winter light through the canopy. He had said, "No." Harlan had said, "People are saying things about you on there." Ray had said, "People said things in demand letters and petition signatures and Gazette letters too. None of it changed the deed. None of it changed the Curtis Hale letter. None of it changed the statutory period." He had walked back down toward the property's midsection, the track visible below as he descended the slope. He had stopped at the track and had looked east toward the HOA fence line and west toward the CR7 gate. Both gates locked, both sets of signs in place. The agricultural permit in the planning department's file, the 2009 letter in the road department's permanent records, the quiet title complaint on the circuit court's public docket. He had taken out his phone and had written Lena a 1-sentence email. "Let the record speak." He had sent it and had walked west along the track toward the CR7 gate, the gravel surface under his boots, the cleared drainage ditches alongside, the January cold around him, and the 99 acres running quiet in every direction. The hearing was 6 weeks out. The record was complete. Ray had nothing to add to it. The hearing had been set for 9 a.m. on March 14th. Courtroom 2 of the Crestwood County Circuit Court. The bench elevated, the gallery holding 9 people when the case was called. Gerald Fitch and 2 board members in the second row. Donna Marsh in the third row behind them. Phil Garrett in the back row alone. Ray had sat at the plaintiff's table with Lena, a yellow legal pad in front of him that he did not write on. He had arrived at 8:40 and had reviewed the exhibit binders with Lena for 15 minutes before the courtroom filled. Bev Hollis had been at the defendant's table with Gerald, who had insisted on attending despite Bev's suggestion that his presence was unnecessary. Gerald had sat with his hands folded on the table and had not looked at Ray. The judge was the Honorable Patricia K. Wood, 17 years on the circuit court bench, a reputation among county practitioners for close reading of the record and direct questioning from the bench. Lena had told Ray the previous week, "Judge K. Wood reads the briefs. She will have read the complaint, the answer, and both exhibit binders before she sits down." Ray had said, "Good." Lena had presented the plaintiff's case in 31 minutes. The chain of title, the 2007 Agricultural Access Road Permit, establishing the track's private origin, and then the Curtis Hale letter. She had read its operative language into the record directly. The road is private property, and its use by subdivision residents or any other members of the public is not permitted. I did not authorize this use, and I was not aware of it until recently. She had then presented the 2 independent legal grounds. The statutory period, Tennessee Code Annotated, Section 28-2-103, required 20 years of continuous adverse use. The HOA claimed 14. 14 was not 20. No court applying the statute could find a prescriptive easement on 14 years of use. The adverse use interruption. Prescriptive easement required use hostile to the owner's interest, open, continuous, without the owner's consent or acknowledgement. Curtis Hale's August 2009 letter, filed permanently in the county's public records at his specific request, was an affirmative declaration by the owner of record that the road was private and the use unauthorized. Filed in the same year the use began, the adverse use clock, if it started at all in 2009, was interrupted in 2009 by the owner's own publicly filed declaration. She had sat down at 9:41. Bev had presented the HOA's defense in 24 minutes. She had acknowledged the statutory period problem. It was in the record, and had characterized it as a technical shortfall the court should weigh against the community's long-term reliance. Judge Kaywood had looked up from her notes at that point, but had not spoken. On the Curtis Hale letter, Bev had argued that a communication between a property owner and a county agency did not constitute formal legal notice to the HOA or its residents, that the letter's presence in an administrative correspondence folder, rather than the deed records, meant the HOA lacked constructive notice, and that Curtis's failure to take further action demonstrated the letter was not a legal interruption of the adverse use period. Judge Kaywood had let her finish. She had then said, "Ms. Hollis, I want to ask you about the Curtis Hale letter directly." Bev had said, "Of course, Your Honor." The judge had said, "Mr. Hale filed a letter with a county agency in August 2009, stating that the track was private property, that it was not a public right-of-way, and that the HOA's use was not authorized. He specifically requested that the letter be placed in the county's permanent file. The county complied. The letter has been in the public record since August 2009. She had paused. She had said, "If the property owner wrote to the county in 2009, declaring the road private and closed to public use, and had that declaration permanently filed in a public record, in what sense was the HOA's subsequent use of the road adverse and hostile to the owner's interest, rather than simply in defiance of a known private declaration?" The courtroom had been quiet. Bev had said, "Your Honor, the adverse use doctrine requires that the use be hostile in the sense that it is without permission. The letter establishes the owner's awareness, but does not," the judge had said. "It establishes more than awareness. It establishes a public declaration that the use was unauthorized. My question is whether use can be characterized as adverse to the owner's interest when the owner publicly declared, in a permanent county record, that the use was not permitted. If the owner has declared the use impermissible in a public filing, is the subsequent use hostile to the owner's interest, or is it simply open defiance of a known prohibition?" Bev had said, "The argument would be that the users lacked actual knowledge of the county filing." The judge had said, "The filing is a public record. The doctrine of constructive notice applies to public records. I understand the letter was not in the deed records, but Mr. Hale filed it where he filed it because it was a response to a county road maintenance question. He asked the county to treat it as a permanent record of the road's private status. The county did so. I want you to explain to me why that declaration does not interrupt the adverse use period as a matter of Tennessee law." Bev had cited two cases, neither directly on point, both distinguishable. She had concluded by reiterating the community reliance argument. The judge had thanked her and called a 15-minute recess. She had returned to the bench at 11:14 and had read her ruling from a 2-page handwritten order. The plaintiff's quiet title action was granted. The HOA's prescriptive easement defense failed on two independent grounds. First, Tennessee Code Annotated Section 28-2-103 required 20 years of continuous adverse use. The HOA's claimed use period was 14 years. The statutory requirement was not met. This ground alone was dispositive. Second, Curtis Hale's August 2009 letter to the Crestwood County Road Department constituted an affirmative public declaration by the owner of record that the track was private property, that no public right-of-way existed, and that the HOA's use was unauthorized. Filed in the county's permanent public records at Mr. Hale's specific request, it was a public act by the owner asserting the road's private character in the same year the HOA GK use began. Under Tennessee law, such a declaration interrupted the adverse use period. The HOA could not establish continuous, uninterrupted adverse use for any period following August 2009, when the owner had filed a permanent public declaration of the use's unauthorized character in that same year. The court declared that no easement of any kind encumbered Parcel 1-1-0044-002. The HOA held no legal right to use the track. The gates were lawfully installed. The HOA was enjoined from using the track or the gate access points. Costs awarded to the plaintiff. The clerk entered the order at 11:22. Lena had a certified copy from the clerk's window at 11:45, and had driven directly to the county register's office. The order was filed as a Reg K instrument against the HOA's parcel, permanently in the county deed records, attached to every future title search on every Pinecrest Estates property. She had called Ray from the register's office parking lot. She had said, "Recorded. The order is in the deed records." Ray had said, "Send me the instrument number." She had sent it by text. He had written it in his field notebook, the case number, the recording number, the date, and had closed the notebook and gone back to the fence line he had been walking when the call came. Gerald had posted to the HOA forum the evening of the ruling. A single paragraph, no preamble. GGK, the circuit court has ruled in favor of the property owner. The track connecting our western access point to County Road 7 is private property. No easement exists, and the court has found that none was established by our prior use. Please use the Pinecrest Drive entrance and County Road 7 for all access going forward. The board will not be pursuing further legal action. The post had drawn 61 replies by midnight, some angry, some resigned. Phil Garrett posting a single line at 11:40 p.m. The Curtis Hale letter was always in the county's records. This outcome was always where this was going. Donna had not replied to any of them. The Save Our Shortcut Facebook group had gone quiet within 48 hours of the ruling. The last post, a photograph of the locked gate with no caption, posted by Kim Alford at 33 Pinecrest Way. The image receiving 4 reactions and no comments before the group's activity stopped entirely. The 11-minute commute had resumed for 312 households. South on the subdivision streets to the Pinecrest Drive entrance, east to the CR7 junction, then north or south depending on destination. The 7 minutes the shortcut had saved were simply part of the morning again, the way they had been before 2009, when Curtis Hale had built a timber management road on his own property, and the geography had briefly offered a convenience that was never anyone's to keep. Donna Marsh had resigned from the social committee 6 weeks after the ruling. A 1-paragraph email to the board, citing personal reasons, thanking the community for the years, no mention of the gate or the case, or the Facebook group she had created and then deleted. Phil Garrett's post from twice. Patricia Wen, at 18 Pinecrest Court, had been elected to the social committee chair position at the next board meeting, running unopposed. Ray had walked the eastern fence line the morning after the ruling was recorded, a Tuesday, March cold still in the air, the frost on the fence wire catching the early light. He had started at the CR7 gate and had walked east along the track's northern edge, following the fence line that separated his property from the HOA subdivision. The powder-coated HOA gate visible at the track's eastern end, where it met the subdivision's western boundary. The gate was padlocked on both sides, his lock on his gate, the HOA's lock on theirs, the two structures facing each other across 0.6 miles of gravel track that was now, by court order recorded in the county deed records, unambiguously private. He had walked the fence slowly, the post condition, the wire tension, the places where the frost had weighted the wire overnight. He had made notes in his field notebook the same way he had made notes on his first fence line walk in January, the same methodical attention to the physical condition of the boundary. The fence needed 2 new posts on the northern section and a wire restretch on the southeastern corner. He had noted both. At the eastern end, where the fence line met the HOA boundary and the 2 gates faced each other, he had stopped and had looked west along the track. The gravel surface ran straight from where he stood to the CR7 gate 0.6 miles away, the same surface he had found on his first site visit in November, the same maintained gravel, the same cleared drainage ditches alongside. The tire tracks that had compressed the gravel at the edges from 14 years of daily commuter use were still visible. The compressed gravel at the track's margins, the worn surface showing the accumulated passage of vehicles that had turned and accelerated at this eastern end each morning before the gate went up. The grass had already begun to recover at the very edges, the winter grass pushing back into the margin where the tires had kept it worn, the slow reclamation of a surface that was no longer being used. It would take a season. By summer, the gravel margins would be soft with new growth, and by fall the track's edges would look like what the track was, a private farm road on a working timber property, its surface intact, its drainage maintained, its gates locked at both ends. He had not posted about the ruling. He had not called anyone beyond Lena's recording confirmation, He had not replied to anyone on the HOA forum, which he had never joined, or the Facebook group, which he had never seen, or the Gazette letters page, which he had read once at the feed store counter in February. The record had spoken. He had nothing to add to it. He had walked back to the farmhouse along the track's length, the full 0.6 miles, west from the HOA gate to the CR7 gate, the gravel under his boots, the frost burning off the drainage ditches in the morning sun. He had unpadlocked the CR7 gate, walked through, padlocked it behind him, and walked to the farmhouse porch. He had sat in the folding chair he kept by the porch door, the same chair he had set outside the travel trailer in January to watch the eastern fence line after Donna's first visit to the gate. The travel trailer was gone now, moved to a storage lot in the county seat in February, when the farmhouse work was far enough along to sleep in. The porch boards were sound. The view east from the porch showed the tree line on the eastern boundary, the mixed hardwood on the upper slope, the timber stand that Harlan Webb had assessed at $65,000 to $90,000 in a selective cut, the ridge line running north to the loblolly pine stand that would be the first harvest. The eastern fence line was not visible from the porch. The track was not visible. The HOA gate was not visible. The boundary between his 99 acres and the subdivision's western edge was somewhere in the tree line, marked by the fence he had just walked, held in place by the deed recorded in the county register's office, and now reinforced by a court order filed as a recorded instrument against the HOA's parcel. The 99 acres ran quiet in the March morning. He had not bought the property to fight anyone. He had bought it for the timber, the creek bottom, the working land quality that 31 years of right-of-way acquisition had taught him to recognize. He had installed the gate because the gate was legally correct. He had retained Lena because the demand letter required a response. He had filed the quiet title action because the record needed to be complete. The record was complete. The deed said what it said. The Curtis Hale letter said what it had always said. The court order said what the law required it to say when the facts were what the facts were. He had looked at the tree line for a long time, the eastern boundary, the hardwood on the slope, the frost finishing its burn-off in the morning sun. Then he had gone inside to make coffee and had looked at the fence repair notes in his field notebook and had written the materials list for the 2 new posts and the wire restretch on the southeastern corner. The gate was locked. The track was empty. The record said what it said. There was fence work to do.